I feel it myself, obviously, but I see it in a lot of people. I think this part is like the missing piece, or the because it's not that clear how you can get into that, into being able to communicate, first of all, and second of all, because it's most people's goal, right, to be able to communicate. Like I said, I I love the fact that I can understand German podcast now, and Polish, any Polish podcast, almost any Polish podcast. But again, my main goal is to be able to communicate, right? Like, just the first part is amazing and I love it. But my goal, and I think most people's goal, is to actually be able to use the language and talk to people. Hi, Reggie.
Hi, good to see you, Alvaro.
It's good to see you as well. And well, welcome to the podcast. First of all, it's really a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you very much. Absolutely a pleasure to be here. Very glad to be invited.
And yeah, to get things started, because we're gonna talk mostly about the output part of the language, because like I've been talking about recently, that I've sort of figured out the part about input, like how to get to a point in which you can understand pretty much anything, or how you get the language into your head. But I'm really curious. I'm trying to figure out the part about output, about when to start speaking, how, because I believe it's the missing piece for a lot of people, including myself, to be honest. And probably most people's goal is to be able to communicate in that language, right? So we'll talk about that a lot, but just so people get to know you a little bit, if you can tell us a bit about your language background, your native language, languages you speak, how you went about it, and anything that you think might be relevant.
Sounds perfect. Sounds great. Okay, so to give you a sense of who I am linguistically, um, I I am my native language is English, and I have a fairly rich, I would say rich, linguistic background in that I grew up in a multilingual environment to an extent.
Mm.
My mother speaks multiple languages. She speaks French. She speaks a language called Haitian Creole,
Mm.
and these languages are very rich in themselves, or very influential, very rich, very very helpful for giving one a base, and so to speak, for understanding at least many other languages.
Mm.
Um, and so she would say that she spoke to me my entire childhood in French, and I would respond, not maybe necessarily with words in those languages, but with my actions. She would ask me to do something, I would perform it. It's almost the idea of like a TPR kind of thing, where you're not responding necessarily in the language, but it's clear that your comprehension is being developed because you can. But at some point that stopped, and her speaking to me in that language, and perhaps my development stopped to a certain extent. But my enthusiasm, my motivation, my desire, my passion for languages never ended. And the only thing is, though, is because I wasn't directly involved with the practice, so to speak, of learning languages, perhaps one could say it turned into a more abstract kind of passion, meaning I turned more towards linguistics. I turned more towards the study about language, so to speak. And which is not a bad thing. It's a good thing, I believe, to a certain extent. But it's not as immediate. It's not as immediate of gratification, perhaps you could say, as learning a language, as really acquiring a language. Let's be completely straightforward about what we're talking about. And that was reignited not too long ago, about 4 years ago now, 4 years ago, with discovering a number of things. First off, discovering people like Steve Kaufman, discovering people like Luca Lampariello, discovering dreaming Spanish was one of the most important things, because this was a real actionable type of way of acquiring languages. Not just people saying, yeah, you should listen to and read. That's a real good thing, which is good. It's wonderful that there are people who exist now that are very, very vocal about the reality of language acquisition. But it's another thing to have real materials to be able to focus your attention on, to be able to start developing, to be able to start seeing progress, which is important for wanting to continue. And that's when one could say my story began, so to speak, of course, as far as language acquisition and as a personal habit, as something which I want to really focus on for the rest of my life, to have a place for it, at very least, and to have it as a focus.
Absolutely.
So I would say that just to conclude, I would say that this is one of the most important elements for me of this my linguistic story. What I just described, and
Cool. You're just really passionate about languages, right?
And communication, yes, communication, relationships, many things. But languages always seem to be able to connect language to everything, right? So
yeah, that's a good point, because I'm passionate about languages myself. I've talked about it several times, but recently I've realized exactly what you said, that obviously I like the process of sort of decoding a language in itself, but ultimately it's a bridge between people, right? It's a way to communicate with people from other countries in their native language, which is priceless, right?
Absolutely.
So it's right. It's not just purely the linguistic part, which, like you said, is great, and it's a great. I don't know how to put it into words, but when a language becomes comprehensible all of a sudden, something that was pure noise before that, it's a great feeling. Yeah. Cool. So then, English is your native language, like you said. Your mom spoke French and Haitian Creole with you as a kid, right? You've been learning Spanish, as I know. The moment you came across Dreaming Spanish and similar resources. And well, first of all, I agree on what you said, because for the first time with Spanish, I guess, people had a lot of videos, resources created in a way that was going to help them no matter where they were at in their journey, even from scratch. Like actionable, practical videos they could watch to get their comprehension ability to not native-like level, but pretty high, right? Or to a point in which you can start using the real world podcast and other native or other resources for native speakers, right? Where they don't even modify the way they communicate.
I would contest that only very slightly, not to waste too much time, but I think for all languages, any and all languages that exist currently, the super beginner level, I think that's a real distinction, first off. I think that's a real phenomena. I think there's a super beginner level. And secondly, I think no matter what language you look at, it's lacking. There's material. There needs to be material generated to specifically target zero beginners. But anyways.
No, yeah, good point. Yeah, it's true. Because I could get away with it when I started with Italian, Portuguese, French. But that's not going to be the case if I try Japanese, for example. Right.
Japanese. Yes, many languages.
First example that came to mind. Right. So
absolutely.
Taking Spanish as an example, I understand that you started with Spanish by, watching Dreaming Spanish and similar videos, just by focusing on comprehensible input, as I've always been talking about, until And I especially interested in the part that I talked about in the intro. Like, how much time did it take you to get to a point in which you could understand a lot and you started thinking about the output part of the language? And if you remember approximately, of course.
Those, to be honest, it's a very complex question to answer, but I can do it. I might need to do it in a few parts because I don't think it's as clean as I reached a certain point, I started thinking about output, and then I proceeded because output was there from the beginning. There was the desire.
Right.
The want. So I started, and I started watching Dreaming Spanish and saw, wow, this is very interesting, but I wonder if this is really something that can function. I don't know. I never heard of anything like this, and maybe it doesn't work. But I'll give it a try. And so I started to see progress very rapidly. Within a month, I started to notice, oh wow, this din of noise, this quote unquote, this Spanish so-called or whatever, I don't know, to think of it from back to think of it as I was thinking, this is starting to make sense to me. I'm starting to understand whole sentences, and very quickly, in fact, very quickly meaning months, of course, maybe 6 months. Within 6 months time, I started to say, oh wow, this is incredible. Let me see if there's some kind of special linguistic programming that's going on. I'm being brainwashed with just this channel of YouTube. And so I looked at other channels, and I found channels like I believe you've even interviewed him, El Jardín de Martín, for example, or Mr. Salas, or who else? Other Spanish language natives who have content about language learning, about language acquisition, more interesting to me. And I started to notice, wow, maybe I don't understand literally every sentence, but I'm actually understanding much of the meaning. I'm following the gist. I'm following what they're trying to get across very well, to the extent where in certain moments I can predict what's going to be said next. I can, it's a good you get a good sense of how much you understand from things like that, from moments where, oh, the next word is going to be this. It pops into your head. You don't even have to think about it. The word pops into your head. So I started to think, okay, there's really something to this. I can't deny the truth to myself now. I have to really see. And so I started to look into the information on the Dreaming Spanish website, because there's information about a method. And I know it took me a while, but I wasn't sure. I didn't know if it was valuable. I discovered there was value in it. And so I decided to say, okay, well, maybe there's some knowledge here. Maybe there's some understanding I can discover. And I found a whole ideology, so to speak, a whole framework of understanding, to put it more objectively, a whole framework of understanding for acquiring language. And included in that was this idea of don't output until you're ready. Wait, basically, until you're ready. And there can be problems even if you try to output. And I think there's still, with many of us, there's still a lot of doubt surrounding some of those beliefs. Personally, I believe there's something to it. I think there is some truth in that understanding that speaking when you're not ready is not a good thing necessarily. And I think the thing is, though, is how we define when we're ready. Right. That's and it's a problem. It's not just the definition is important, not just for the theory. It's important for inside of ourselves, how we define it. because that's going to change our psychological relationship to output. And that's going to change our experience of output. No. It's going to, if we don't feel comfortable when we speak, others' perceptions of our speech will probably be changed. And that's not to say it'll be changed for the worse or the better, but it will be different.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're trying to control things, which is also maybe a problem too, if we want to see, a Spanish word came to me because I really like that word, but I'll have to say it in English. If we want to take out what is of benefit to us and control our result for that, we want to limit the amount of variation, right? We want to so it's kind of important to maybe limit, well, first off, have a clear definition for ourselves,
Right.
And then all these other things come out of that.
Mm-hmm. Right, because it's relevant for practical reasons as well, like you said. And there's always that tough balance between, do I feel uncomfortable because I'm not ready yet, or do I feel uncomfortable because I got too cozy, too comfortable by just listening? That's one of my concerns recently, because I've been talking about it, and you said it beautifully. Like, input, there's no way to acquire a language without input, without comprehensible input. Like, I've talked about it 1,000 times. I'll continue to do so because I believe it 1,000%. And actually, I've been to Germany recently, and it's amazing. I could understand pretty much everything. And I'll talk about my progress in both input and output in a future video, but it's amazing how I've gone from, like, my German has gone from being nice, like I don't know what they're talking about at all, to being in Germany with native speakers and understanding. I was in a train, and there was a guy just talking to me, telling stories. I understood everything. It's amazing.
It is.
And but the reason why I'm having these conversations about output recently is because I've seen it in myself, in my students, and in other people, that tough balance that I talked about sometimes, and I'm guilty of it, like I said, myself, we can get too cozy, too comfortable with just listening. And the moment you find yourself in a situation in which you can't communicate, you freak out a little more than you should because you got too comfortable. That's my point. And so that's why, I'm having these conversations. I had the one with Luca, in which he talked about some of the ideas that, well, I'll leave it somewhere here so people can watch it in Spanish, about some of the ideas that he uses to practice those languages whenever he's been learning through input for a while. Again, that's the most important part. And I'm curious about your experience with Spanish specifically, or whatever language you want to talk about. Like you said, the desire to communicate was there from the beginning. But was there a moment in which, you started thinking, like you said, words popped out in your mind? You knew where they were going to say next, like in a series, podcast, whatever it was. Was there a moment in which you started forcing yourself to speak, like, finding a tandem partner or going to meetings? I'm curious about that part.
Absolutely. A great place to start. We're talking about this. I think that I've been trying all along. I've been trying little tastes, so to speak, to begin with. Mm-hmm. Little taste here, several months later, a little taste there, more months later, etc. And with apps like Tandem, it makes it very easy. Within seconds, I could close this Zoom meeting down, open up the app, and within seconds, I'll be in a conversation with maybe 7 other native Spanish speakers.
All right, so it's group conversation.
The group chats, yes, mm-hmm. Exactly. And it's a nice place to as they say in English, to kind of dip your toe in the pool.
Okay.
Because you don't have to submerge fully. You can start by listening to the conversation that the people are saying. And then if it's interesting to you, if you suddenly start hearing words even come to you because of the conversation is bringing it out of you, then you can jump in immediately. And then people are mostly interested in having a lot of different speakers. So, you know, it's very likely they'll invite you. You can go up on the stage, so to speak, in the app. You can go on stage and then start speaking immediately what you were thinking, what the words that came to you in Spanish, put them out there. And then you see people's reaction. And then if you want to stay. If you feel, I'm not ready, leave. So, but there's that.
So, sorry to interrupt, Reggie, just a little thing. And is there a combination of native speakers and foreigners, or?
Given how many people are using this app now, you can choose, because, you know, it's funny. I have to say it though. You folks, you Spanish language natives are it's wonderful. I love it. It's beautiful. You guys want to talk so much that sometimes instead of practicing, quote unquote practicing, which I have, obviously practice is not, I don't necessarily believe that it's a valuable thing, but instead of practicing English like you intended to do, you wind up speaking to a room full of other Spanish language natives and socializing, which is good too. I mean, socializing is good. And then you can talk about language learning. You can talk about this. You can talk about not you, but you understand what I mean.
Whoever
Spanish
goes, yeah.
Exactly, whoever. And so there's a wide range of different types of situations you can encounter in the app, and it's very nice to have that available. Another thing very nice to have available as far as output is concerned, and which I use to a great extent, is crosstalk. From very early on, within 200 hours of Dreaming Spanish, 200 to 300 hours, somewhere around there, I sought out as many crosstalk partners as I could find, which were very few at the time. Now it's developing, it's growing. People are starting to learn more about it. There are different sources of information that didn't exist even when I started. Finding crosstalk partners, having a regular crosstalk partner, a crosstalk partner that you have a strong relationship with, it's the best thing. The best thing for output, for beginning output, because that person who understands you, they're so supportive of you. You have so much in common with them, so many things. There's never an end to the conversation. Should you have all those conditions satisfied, it's perfect. Because when you feel comfortable enough, which is probably very soon, with someone like this, who you have a relationship with that sounds like this, you can begin to test things. Maybe just a phrase, maybe more. Maybe you want to just work on your pronunciation, quote unquote, work on. I don't believe you can really work on it, but just to have the experience of reading a Wikipedia article, let's say, that is of interest to both parties. Let's say a philosophy, both of you and your crosstalk partner have a love for philosophy, and then maybe Kant or whoever, Descartes.
Tough topic to get started. Yes.
But let's say that's true. Let's say that you both are interested in Descartes, and you open up the Wikipedia article, and there are going to be words that trip you up, and your partner will be there to give you to just quickly say it, and then you just move on.
Yep.
But really, the focus is on meaning, and I believe that's one of the most important things. Not just for input, but for output too, is a focus on meaning. I think the natural approach to quickly define what the natural approach for output is, I think it's almost the same as a reflection of what it is for input, which is that we need to keep focusing on meaning and stop focusing on ourselves, our worries, our everything else. Focus on the relationship, communicating what you want, what you want to, what needs to be, depending on the situation. And I had an experience recently that really showed me this, because I'm working on my French a little bit. Okay, I'm looking at some French channels, and it's great because I'm already have all of this subconscious knowledge built up from years and years and years. And then also when you add other Romance languages, it's a match made in heaven. It's basically, I'm just cruising. I'm just enjoying all my experience with it. But I'm not at the level where I want to speak yet, or I don't feel like I want to speak yet, a lot. But the thing is though, is this is a situation I've noticed many times, is that when you have to speak, meaning when you're in a situation where you're communicating with someone who they can't speak English, they cannot speak English, and maybe they can say a few words, but that's it. And you must communicate with them in order to really get across what it is that needs to be expressed for necessity. Those are really, really wonderful situations to begin speaking.
Right. There's no way out, right? Yeah.
No, exactly. And you're talking about forcing yourself. And then also you feel good. You feel like this person needs this information. I need to focus on meaning. I can't worry about myself. They need this. They need to have this information. Right. And it happened to me recently. A friend of my mother called on the phone. And once again, I'm not beginning my French speaking, and I'm hesitant to even do so. But because she doesn't speak English, she does not speak English, and I had to communicate with her about what's going on with my mother's situation, with etc. And so I found so instead of worrying, instead of saying no, I can't, instead of maybe saying I'm sorry, goodbye. What I did was I sat there and hesitated momentarily, but hesitated to communicate clearly, which is different. I know it sounds the same. It sounds the same as, but there's a difference internally. There's a difference there. And even with the result, because I was able to communicate in few words, but in very well placed words, I believe, because it had the desired effect of communicating to her. She isn't here at the moment. She'll be back within an hour. Please give a call back within an hour. Those type of very simple meanings. Immediately she understood, and it was able to, and she was able to, she understood enough because she called back in an hour. It's like a TPR almost response. Yeah. That worked.
Right.
No, please.
No, I was going to say that it's a great point. I was just thinking about my own experience, that somehow I've learned to only focus on meaning when it comes to input, but I still struggle with it when it comes to my output. I just realized as you were speaking, like I have no issue with focusing on meaning with input. Like I don't care about form. I know I'm just getting it. But when I speak, I do worry about form. Like I want to sound good. I want to sound as close to quote unquote perfect as possible. And it's a great point because actually I'd never thought about it in that way, but it is important. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's almost as if we get in the way of our own.
Oh yeah.
Our own understanding of, I mean, certainly that's true for input. I mean, we're getting people, there are people, you can go onto Reddit and find these forums, there are these groups where there are people who are saying, no, you have to study grammar. There's no way. No, I won't do it. I can't look at the input. It's almost as if they're trying to keep and this is very biased, of course. I'm saying this from my perspective, and I'm with someone who's sympathetic to this perspective, but they're trying to keep the truth out. They don't want to see the reality of language acquisition.
Yeah.
And when it comes to, it's interesting because when it comes to input, it's something that's there. It's something that's in the world. It's not something that you control. People are making media. It's there. There are books that are sitting on your desk. in the language or whatever, it's out there. It's almost more objective, right? Input is more objectives. It's funny. It's like a reverse. It's almost like a strange paradox, because input, something that goes in, something that's in, ends up being internal. It has to come from outside, and it has to be something you didn't create it, you didn't manipulate it in almost any way, perhaps, and but then when it comes to output, it's the reverse. It's something that has to come, if it's natural, it has to come from inside, and it has to go out. So it's it has to be something that there has to be a moment where you say, it's gonna come, it has to come out. It has to come from me too. I'm the only one who can say this in this situation. I'm the only one who has this knowledge, who's situated, who has the phone in their hand, or who has the friend in front of them, or who has the stranger there that needs directions or that needs help. And there has to be a moment where you say to yourself, I have to overcome myself. I have to overcome my fears. I have to overcome my boundaries, my restrictions, my limits,
right.
And it has to be right now. So it's a very personal thing. It's very interesting because output is very personal and input is very impersonal. I mean, you can look at it that way. Everything.
Yeah, I understand. Uh-huh.
But so it's a very personal. It's the most personal thing. And then, as we're all aware, some people, their personal life is nothing to them. They let it's just all falls out of them, like as natural as can be. And we usually label those people as extroverts, of course. They can't help it. Even if they try, they have to force themselves to keep it in, right?
Right.
Force them to keep from speaking their mind. And whereas, there are other individuals who are more reserved, and there's a whole spectrum. You can't just say, it's just one or zero. Yeah. There are people who, you might need to coax them. You might need to give them a little candy, quote unquote, as an analogy. It's difficult. It's difficult for them, more difficult than others. And so it is important, very important for output to understand where you are in this spectrum, to understand who you are to a certain extent. It's not maybe necessary. I don't think it is. I don't think it's necessary, but it's very, very useful to know who you are, quote unquote, in order to be able to understand what you need, what your needs are, a lot of different things. I mean, I could keep going on listing, but let's just say to know what your needs are as far as output is concerned, and when to begin, and what to do, and how to do it, and what people you should be around, and etc.
Yeah, because perhaps you want to sound like a native speaker and want to talk about a lot of things, but then you, in your own native language, you're more of an introvert yourself, and that's not the way you communicate, right? So it doesn't make a lot of sense to try to do it that way. But it's true what you're saying, because I think we always know someone who, despite of not being able to communicate that well yet, they just let it out. They don't care, or they don't seem to care. They probably do, but they act despite. I mean, not regardless. Sorry, they act on it regardless of how they're feeling, right, or the fears and so on. But mostly for people that are a little more reserved, but also for extroverts as well, I think that the crosstalk idea that you talked about, I was thinking about it. That is really interesting. I mean, I obviously knew about it before our conversation, and I've used it myself. But I've kind of gotten away from it recently, so I want to get back to it, because I think, first of all, even when you're doing pure crosstalk, that you're only using your native language, it's still more natural or more real than watching a video, because it's a conversation, first of all. And then, like you said, once once you have more familiarity with that person, you trust them, you can start little by little, you can start to incorporate, you know, your foreign languages into the conversation, like both of you. And the other person is going to understand how you feel. It's not just someone in the street, in the language where your target language spoken, that they're in a hurry. And you know, some people, they just don't have the time to sort of look at your needs and modify the way they communicate. These are people that have the same quote unquote problem that you have, right? And I just want to add one thing that I've witnessed recently myself with Polish, that who you talk to and the situation matters a lot, especially at the beginning. Because I've been talking about my journey with Polish recently, my struggles at times. But I just met a friend recently, and she's a teacher herself with this approach, you know, so she understands, and I just felt so relaxed talking to her, and the language was there. It's like, I mean, I kind of knew it because I can understand podcasts, I can understand everything. Like she told me, like, you understand everything, right? But it was always that output part that got me problems. But I realized the difference between that specific experience and, you know, being with a group of people, even if something like my soccer friends, for example, that, you know, there's like a group of people, they use a lot of slang sometimes, you know. So sometimes I feel like, well, damn, I understand what they're saying, but I felt so relaxed with her that I thought to myself, and that was probably the case when I started with English, to be honest, that, you know, it's sort of like a stepping stone, you know, like you start getting your confidence back with conversation like that. Once you know the language is there, because I know the language is there, like I said, because I understand everything. And I can communicate, you know, for the most part. It's just that sometimes I feel the frustration not being able to say what I want to say, looking at how much I can understand, right? Which is normal for the most part, but you can get frustrated at times. But saying it happen in real life, I think it's like, you know, getting the outside affirmation that you need sometimes. That, you know, ideally it'll come from you, from inside all the time, and you wouldn't need it, but you know, we're human. We're not perfect, right? So sometimes a little outside affirmation helps.
Oh my! Even just the smallest bit, a grain of outside information, and it makes you feel like I did the right thing. I feel good now. It validates you. It makes you feel like, you know, you know, this was the right thing to do. I did it the right way. And sometimes you just need a little bit. And the thing is that what you're saying is absolutely what I'm, you know, it's very, very much in line with what the kind of things I'm saying, is that the relationship, focus on the relationships, you know, focus on what you're saying, focus on that more so, and you probably get a lot more value from your experience. You know, you probably get more out of your attempt to try to communicate. As opposed to, now there's nothing wrong with it in certain circumstances. There's nothing wrong with maybe using a word that sounds kind of nice, you know, and you know, okay, this is what someone would say in this situation, in this language. They would use this phrase, and to sound to you know, to make it give it a spice or an ornamentation or something that is nice.
To sound more like them as well, right?
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. Like this is what the native thing to say would be to say. But sometimes, a lot of the time, I think it's almost more honest to yourself to just say things just as it's almost as if the situation molds you. It molds your speech, and you're forced to use whatever resources you have available, whatever connections you've developed, whatever ideas you've formed.
Yeah.
to speak, and it doesn't sound native. It sounds, or maybe it sounds like bookish, or it sounds like why do you sound like a textbook, or why do you sound like a professor right now? Or someone might think this when they hear you.
Yeah.
But it's what's natural to you at that moment, and that's fine. Maybe you listen to a lot of philosophers speaking in Spanish, or maybe you listen to a lot of fill in the blank scientists, or something, and your language, the associations you made, your personal language has been shaped to that, meaning the vocabulary, all of those things. That's what's natural to you because you exposed yourself to it more. But everyone will understand you. They might say, "Could you explain that word? I've never heard that word." in their own language, they might say that,
right,
or whatever it is. I'm saying that there might be a little bit of not natural unnaturalness to it, but the grammar and all of the everything that is not the specific words that makes language comprehensible will be comprehensible to them, basically.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I understand.
So I mean, that's just a strategy. That's just a little technique. But it's nonetheless, every technique counts. Every little thing counts when it comes to doing something so challenging, to certain individuals, certain introverts, especially like me, to be able to really express yourself extemporaneously, not having a speech memorized or.
Right.
And there are other techniques, very, very valuable techniques from people like Luca that he's divulged publicly about, for example, self-talk, self-speaking to oneself. That's a very, very powerful technique that not enough people really describe or talk about. And I think, especially for introverts, but also extroverts, we can benefit from using that. Especially when we begin to feel like, once again, we have to focus on meaning. Even when we're talking to ourselves, we have to. So it should be free flowing. It shouldn't be something forced, something hesitant, and where we're trying to, what's the word for that? And I mean, maybe one time when that happens, it's natural, it's fine, but just find a different set of words for it then. Just go around it and just keep flowing in your own thoughts. So yeah, but it's a very useful technique. I feel like there's a lot more to be said about it than has been. I'll just put it that way, about self-talk. There are strategies, there are ways of doing it that are better than other ways. And it's important to, I feel like someone should write a manual, perhaps, or create a series of videos that where they're of techniques that are battle tested, of
the word.
Yeah, exactly. And but yeah, so now I lost my own. Okay.
No, good point. No, I mean, because it's like self-talk, for example. You gotta again practice the language itself, but it's also a confidence booster. Just like what you talked about, that just communicating the way you can in that moment, because there's always gonna be sentences that you're gonna be able to output naturally, like a native would say, but others that won't, especially at the beginning when you start out, and that's okay. And this is a message to myself, to be honest, and because
it's a good message for me too. It's a good message for me.
Right. Because first of all, it's a stepping stone. You're communicating, you're getting your confidence up, which is going to help you in the long run, right? And yeah, over time, with more input and more conversations, you'll get there. You'll get to a point in which you can actually use those ideas, those native ideas naturally, because you've heard it 1,000 times. You've been in 1,000 conversations, in 1,000 natural conversations. But I believe it's really, the most important aspect of it is the confidence part. I see it in myself. Like when I talked to my friend the other day, I just felt so good during the conversation and afterwards. And that's sometimes not the case in other situations in which I have to use the language, you know? So I like it. I like it a lot. Like any sort of idea, like you said, like self-talk or just getting into a conversation, knowing that it's not going to be,
Writing is another one. Certain forms of writing is, another. I'm sorry to interrupt you, though.
no, no worries, no worries. Yeah, that's slightly different because you have time to think about it, right? Or, I'm sure there are techniques you can, I don't know, just set a timer and just write it out. That probably works in not focusing on form, right? Because if you're writing it, you have all the time in the world. You might, by default, you might start thinking about form because you have the time to do it, unlike a real time conversation. But yeah, I'm sure you can use techniques like that. Like I'm going to write it, about my day in 5 minutes, as much as I can.
Or another thing, which is maybe a step up from what you just described, the time technique of writing, is instant messages. Having a friend, communicating with, you have their phone number, maybe your crosstalk friend, which, for example, with me is something that I do. But I'm texting with my friend and, we're talking about something in a short period of time. And that adds a limit of time. And you're communicating your thoughts rapidly through text. And so you have maybe a little bit of time, a few seconds to be able to put together your thoughts. But and then also there's a real person there. So it's a real communication, quote unquote, a real.
Yeah.
But there's a distance too that's helpful. So yeah, I'm sure it's I think there needs to, a community of creative people could develop a lot of different of these techniques and methods and things, and hopefully that's what me and you are helping to build right now is a community of people interested in this and who want to develop different approaches than the old traditional ones. So
I want to get into it myself, like talking about it, because again, like my goal is to help people learn languages, and so I'm going to be talking about my own journey all the time, about the things that I'm using that I think are helpful. Because what I mean is that with these techniques on the output part of things, I'm actually starting to use them myself. So I want to talk about them because I love languages. I've read a lot about languages. I've educated myself a lot about languages, and I think about it all the time. So I do have a sense of what technique makes sense and what doesn't, for the most part. But I still want to try them out and test them in myself. Because, it might sound good on paper, but then, not really. Because, like I said, I have a pretty good idea, a pretty good sense in general. But, the moment I start implementing them a little more often in my own language learning journey and routine, I'll talk more about them because, like I said at the beginning, I feel it myself, obviously, but I see it in a lot of people. I think this part is like the missing piece, or because it's not that clear how you can get into being able to communicate, first of all. And second of all, because it's most people's goal, right, to be able to communicate. Like I said, I love the fact that I can understand German podcast now and any Polish podcast, almost any Polish podcast. But again, my main goal is to be able to communicate, right? Like just the first part is amazing and I love it. But my goal, and I think most people's goal, is to actually be able to use the language and talk to people and meet friends when they travel and whatever it is. And I feel like this is the missing piece, like how to bridge the gap between input and output. Because like I said, input, I think it's pretty much this is quote unquote figured out, right?
I think so. In terms of empirically, in terms of the research that exists, in terms of if you even give it a try for a little bit, you'll see it works,
Right.
Um, yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right about also the second part, which is it's the part that needs to be more explicitly figured out for, so to speak, for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the information needs to be out there. The research needs to be out there,
Yep.
even at a higher level. But yeah, it's I think the challenge, which I hope I was able to explain to some extent during our conversation, but the challenge is that the responsibility for input is within you.
Mm-hmm.
The responsibility is to that moment of choice where you have to go start speaking, and the source of it, more even importantly, more fundamentally, more materially fundamentally, the source of it is from each of us. And that's where
the responsibility for output, right? I think.
the responsibility.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Thank you very much for that clarification. Yes, the responsibility for output comes from each of us individually, and more importantly, for physical reality, the source of it comes from each of us individually, and
Right.
each of us is our own. To use the poetic way of saying it, it's our own universe.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of variation there. It's not, I'm sure there are principles that are going to work basically for 99.9 whatever percent of the public. But until we have those, it's a bit confusing. It's a bit confusing. It's a bit frustrating. It's a bit challenging. And it can be for a long time unless we start to find what works for us, basically.
Yep. So, yeah, and to be perfectly clear with everyone, I do believe that comprehensible input does lead to output as well. It's just that these little techniques, those little things that we've been talking about, mainly from the confidence standpoint, but also from actually using the language.
Yeah,
it's I see like a way of, I don't know, being more effective or bridging the gap, like I said. But yes, input does lead to output.
absolutely.
Like I talked about it with German. Like I understood everything in my trip, and I started communicating a little bit, and that's been the case with other languages.
Yeah, it would be really helpful for us to have a clear sense of progression, because then we would know exactly when to begin, when to, etc.
Right.
And there's nowhere else it begins with other than input. There's nowhere else.
I agree.
To even say one word, there's nowhere else it begins but input. So we need to have a sense of progression. So, okay, input here, I reached this level. I don't feel comfortable yet, but I can say things. Maybe I'll try. There should be a clear something, a framework that everyone can use to, not to force themselves into, but to be able to see the forest and the trees and the mountain and the whole scene in front of them, and know, okay, well, I can go this way, and it's going to be nice. There's a lake there. Oh, but maybe I should go up this way because I can rest under the, you understand what I mean, to be able to start.
Yeah, to know where they stand. Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Good point. Okay, and to wrap things up, any final message for language learners out there?
Final message. Well, I wish everyone the best in their journey. I wish I could be there with you. And if you want to communicate with me, you can find me at the Crosstalk Language Exchange Network group on Facebook.
I'll leave the link. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time, Alvaro. It's been a tremendous experience, and for me too, learning how I think about things, or at least how to word the things I've thought about in a perhaps a more clear way, hopefully. But I really appreciate it.
Thank you. No, it's a pleasure. Like I said, I just love languages, and I just want to communicate honestly what I think is the best way to learn languages, because I'm applying it to myself, obviously. And, recently I've been having slight doubts about that part. That's why I'm communicating, and that's why I haven't been talking about languages in general as much in on my channel, because I'm going through that process of trying to understand that little part. Because I like to talk about it honestly. Like I said, like if I'm having little doubts about something, I'll talk about it, because I want to help myself and everyone, right?
It comes across. It's one of the reasons that I was drawn to your channel, and I'm sure it's a reason why many, many people are drawn to you, is they sense the sincerity in what you're trying to achieve. So,
thank you. Means a lot. But, all right. So I thank you again for coming on, and it's I've enjoyed it a lot. Hopefully everyone else as well. And yeah, wish you nothing but the best, Reggie, and thank you again.
Thank you so much. Be well, okay?
All right. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you. Thanks so much for watching this interview. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was helpful for you. And if you want to know more about language learning, language acquisition, like, what's the best way to learn a language, ideas for language learning, the best resources at different levels. Here, you can find the whole playlist with all the interviews I've done so far with different researchers, teachers, polyglots, and so on. And finally, right here, you smash this guy right in the face to subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.